It's very exciting for me to start this new series of shiurim and talks on Gedolim, 5 minutes a week. For a long time, my Talmidim have told me, they notice that I enjoy very much and give over many things from our great men of letters, our Gedolim, and I hope we will be able to share things that are both informative and inspirational, chizuk and chizuk. There was a bacher in pre-war Europe, and he used to dream about meeting the famed gadol already then in the 30s, Rav Aharon from the lines of the Chabura of Slobodka. And he said to a friend, how will I know if I'm just standing on a train and I happen to run into Rav Aharon? How will I know? So his friend turned to him and said, if you see someone with burning blue fire in his eyes, you'll know it's Rav Aharon. And in fact, my father-in-law, Rav Moshe Chaim Sosevsky, told me that once as a child in Borough Park, he went to shul and he saw a chashuv-looking, important-looking elderly gentleman, and he noticed this great intensity, this great blue eyes. And he turned to someone and he asked him, who is that? And the man said, you don't know who that is? That's Reshivas Lakewood. That's Rav Aharon Kotler. Rav Aharon was unique gadol in his genius in learning and the incredible range of his klal activities for the Jewish people. He was a leader's leader and a Rosh Yeshiva's Rosh Yeshiva. He, of course, was the founder, as was mentioned, of the Lakewood Yeshiva, which really changed the face of American Jewry in such significant ways. But he was so much more than that. And people don't always realize the range of who he was. In coming sessions, we're going to deal with the many aspects of his multifaceted Torah personality. And I hope that each video on its own will be a very small part of the picture. And from all of them together, we'll gain some sense, just a little, of this great man. But let's start with a little about his genius and finish with the telling words of Rav Shach's eulogy for him. Rav Chaim Brisker, the founder really of how Torah is learned in yeshiva today, once gave a shiur in Reb Baruch Ber's yeshiva, which there was another yeshiva in Slobodka. It was the famed Slobodka yeshiva, the Alta Slobodka, and for some time, I believe it's called Knesset Yitzchak, the Reb Baruch Ber Levish, the Talmud Muvak of Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, had a yeshiva close by, and the Bachram from Slobodka would go. And that was Reb Baruch Ber's yeshiva, and the famed Reb Chaim, who was really the greatest of the Rosh Yeshiva of his time, came and gave a shiur in his Talmud's yeshiva and Reb Baruch Ber's yeshiva. And the Bachram were speaking to him, and to Reb Chaim after the shiur, and Reb Baruch Ber noticed that Reb Chaim was exhausted and kept talking. And eventually Reb Baruch Ber asked him, he says, Rebbe, how can you talk for so long? You're so exhausted. So he says, I want you to know, Yesh kan bachor echad, there's here one bachor, one young man, Shalav yamod chetzi olam, on him half of the world will stand. Bishvilo zekedai, for him it's worth it to stay here in my exhausted state. It's famous that the Meir Simcha of Dvinsk, the famed Or Samech, the Meshech Chochmah, that's mentioned so many houses every Shabbos, I'm sure will be mentioned some of your houses this Shabbos, said he's going to be, after meeting him, he said he's going to be the Rabbi Akiva Eiger, the great Gaon, Rabbi Akiva Eiger of the next generation. His father-in-law, Rabbi Zalman Meltzer, who himself was a great Gaon, the founder of the Eitz Chaim Yeshiva, not the founder, but Rosh Yeshiva in the Eitz Chaim Yeshiva in Yerushalayim, said that I can say a shiur like my son-in-law, but him, he does it, he prepares it in a few hours, in a day. But what he prepares in a day would take me a week or two to prepare. And he in fact said he had a Rosh Ilui. He said about his son-in-law, he has the head of someone like from 500 years ago. But as we mentioned, it wasn't just his genius and his iluyishkeit and his brilliance. It was the combination which draws me to speak about him, as we'll see, of this tremendous genius and this tremendous Torah scholar, together with being a front out there leader, leading every effort really for Hatzalah and for so many other things to the Chatzmai. We'll talk about politics that we will see. But let's just finish this section with Rav Shach's famed hesped on him. So first off, Rav Shach says, we've lost Gedolei Torah recently. Rav Zalman Meltzer, the Chazon Ish, the Brisker Rav. He said, but as long as Rabbeinu was with us, as long as Rav Aharon was with us, we still had a Beit Achiza, but he was the Aharon. That's how Rav Shach saw him, as the last of a certain generation. Rav Shach himself was, of course, also a gadol. There are other gadolim around, but that darga, that level was something different. And he said an amazing thing. To understand it, I must quote the Gemara in Bava Metzia. Reb Chanina and Reb Chia were arguing with each other. And Reb Chanina says, you're arguing with me? I have the koch, if the Torah will be lost, I could return it with my pilpul, my koch hacharifut, my ability in learning is so great that even if God forbid the Torah was lost from the Jewish people, we could return it with my learning. And Reb Chia said back to Reb Chanina, the second Amora, early Amora said, Bahadi Kedika Mensis, you're arguing with me? I made that the Torah won't be forgotten. You, with your pilpul, could make that if the Torah was forgotten, it would be brought back, but I created a situation where the Torah wasn't lost. And then the Gemara goes and tracks how Reb Chia famously taught 5 children. They taught 5 children. They taught 5 children. He grew the flax and he made the Sefer Torah. He wrote the Sefer Torah. He taught the children. And because of Reb Chia's efforts, the Torah wasn't lost from Klal Yisrael. So what's their machlokus? What's their disagreement? What's their controversy? What are they arguing about? So Rav Shach says the real question was, what's better? Is it better to make one? I want to read his words exactly. It's a very important concept. Is it better to have one person that through the strength of his Torah and his abilities, he can bring up all of the Sviva, all of everyone around him, as we've seen in all of Klal Yisrael's history. When he had an Adam Gadol, a great man, think about the Chazon Ish did in Eretz Yisrael, he can raise the whole generation with him, right? Shamhai Tatar L'Ram. Oh, is it better to have many, many students, and through that to keep the Kiyum of Klal Yisrael going? This was the machlokes between Reb Chia and Reb Chanina. That's from Bava Metzia, Pei Hey Amud Beis. But Rav Shach says that was Rav Aharon. Rav Aharon didn't have one bechina, he didn't have one aspect. He was both Reb Chia and Reb Chanina for his generation together. He was the Adam Gadol who kept the whole Torah, could make through the koch of his tremendous learning and his charifas and his brilliance and his amal of Torah and his work in Torah, that he could make the Torah wouldn't be forgotten. But together with that, he was marba so much Torah, as we'll learn about, and it created so many talmidim and so many mosdot and so many organizations and institutions were dependent on him. He was the father and founder, director of things, as we'll explain in coming weeks. That was Rav Aharon Kotler.